So before we get into this, comment down below, let me know what your favorite engine is, 'cause I'm kind of curious. While most of our content is all Pontiac 400 stuff, I want to talk about the 455 for a second. So the 455 is the big cube option in the Pontiac lineup. This is the largest cube option that was available. This is usually found in really sought after cars. I mean, people really want the 455 because of just the straight cubic inches. You can go a 461 stroker and a 400, but it's just not quite the same. And the gains just really aren't there like they should be versus the 455 and the stock parts combination. So that's why I want to talk about my 5 cams for the Pontiac 455, since we already did the top 5 cams for the Pontiac 400. You can check that out in the card above if you're interested in that. But before we get into kind of this engine at all, I want to talk about some of the specs that we used to build this engine. So the engine is using 6x4 heads. These are hand-ported heads. They flowed 255 at 0.6 and 226 at 0.6 as well. So fairly good flowing heads, especially for being ported iron heads. The flow for the intake is set for a Torquer 2, since that is typically what we recommend because they are the cheapest and most widely available for single plane intakes if you want to reach that upper end. Finally, the engine is using flow numbers for the 850 carb setup that you would typically see on a 455 setup. But now that we know that information, let's get into our first cam. And the first cam actually is one that we really should expect. It's the 41 cam. Pontiac really nailed it with this 041 cam. I mean, it's the right cam for the job for this engine. If you're not familiar with this cam, it is the Ram Air 4 cam. So it's a 231-240 duration cam with 113.5 inch lobe separation angle and 0.47 of an inch lift. So this typically would have been coupled with 1:6:5 ratio rockers to bring it to 0.516. This is the standard Ram Air This is the standard Ram Air 4 setup. That said, most guys will run this with 1.5s because the gain versus that difference just really isn't massive. So it's not worth stressing about for the extra lift, just because of the extra work that has to be done to the head, just to make sure you can clear that 0.516. So being as we're going for horsepower and torque numbers, I left it at 1500 to 7000 RPM range. Mind you, that could be condensed. We could call it 2500 with a stall and 6000 RPM with a shift point to really condense the average numbers down if you wanted to do that. But I want to leave this as wide open so we can get as much data as possible and you guys can kind of have more idea depending on what you're looking for with your application. So looking here, we see that the 455 is not losing steam early. It is really carrying out to 5000 to 5500 RPM. This is essentially where that cam lift really kind of hurts us. But dude, you're still 487 horsepower at 5000 RPM. That's a poop ton. and 548 foot-pounds of torque at 4000 RPM, and that just carries. You see the curve is a fairly nice hump. You'll definitely have a nice experience driving this car. This is the cam that they would have put in these engines typically for a Ram Air 4 setup. Really, you can't complain. I mean, the most you'd want to do to this is do like Pontiac did and do the 1:6:5 ratio rockers, and you're golden. But what if you could do that and run 1:5 ratio rockers? Well, Comp Cams has a muscle car lineup of cams. The 041H, which is the redone version of the cam from Comp. Essentially, it's the same duration, 231, 240, but it has a 0.516 with 1.5 rocker ratios. So while Comp was in there, they also changed the lobe separation angle to 13 flat instead of 13.5 like a standard 41 cam. But let's take a look at these averages between these two cams, since they're so similar, to really kind of see what we have. So what's curious here is the entire curve shifted. So what's curious here actually is the peak torque is a couple numbers higher, the average is a couple numbers higher. The peak horsepower is down, but the average is up 1. So that means there is some goofy stuff going on. So really what we're seeing here is the lobe separation angle moving the numbers to the left. Not a fan of that particularly. I would go with the stock 41 cam But the 41H is available out there, but the Melling 041 cam is cheaper and more easily available. So do with that information what you will. So being as the 041 cam is our current top performer, we're going to keep that one on deck as we move on to the next cam, which is the, well, favorite for my 400 video, the 2802. This is more what the cam is actually designed for, is a 9.2 to 1 or 9.5 to 1 455. It's more what it's designed to kind of fit into, but we run our engines a little hotter than most, so we did what we do. So let's take a look at that 2802 and that 455 and really see what it does. So the 2802 is a 224, 234 duration cam at 114 degree lobe separation angle with a lift of 0.466 and 0.488. But we're going to put this against our what would be stock 41 cam that would come in like a Ram Air 4 setup and kind of get our averages. I'm really curious about this. I think that the 2802 is the right cam for this engine for what I would want to do with it, but it's a little small sounding, right? Let's take a look. So the 2802 actually gained a little bit of torque and lost a lot of horsepower. So we are going from 548 to 551 and 417 average torque up or down to 413 average torque. 477 peak horsepower on the new, and the old was 487, so that is a loss of 10 and a loss of 11 horsepower on average. Let's take a look at the chart and see what that actually looks like. So you see we again moved to the left of the 41 cam. This actually is because of the lack of duration, more than likely, but really the 41 cam has more duration and more lift for this larger engine. This would be totally fine in a street machine. You probably wouldn't even think about it. You know, I should mention, nobody really pushes their 455 past 5,000 RPM anyway, let alone 5,500 or 6,000 RPM. That's insane to most people. So take that into consideration as I'm talking about these numbers. That engine lost above 5,500 or so. So I push those numbers to the left. If you're looking for a street machine you actually can drive every day, that might be a good option for you. So the next cam is a crane cam. This is an aftermarket cam in every way. This cam is the 284 571. There's no way I'd remember that. This cam has got quite a bit of duration at 246 and 255. So this cam has quite a bit of duration. It is a 246, 254 duration cam, so that's quite a bit of duration. 114 degree lobe separation angle, 0.495 and 0.510 for lifts. That's quite a bit of lift. This is with 1:5 ratio rockers, so it should be still fairly stable. Let's run this against the 41 cam again, since that is our current champion. So on this cam we have a lot of movement in numbers. So let's take a look at actually what the movement is, because it's some weird stuff here. So our peak torque dropped by 4, but our average went up by 1. Our peak horsepower went up 14, and our average jumped up 9. So we did big things with this cam. It did quite a bit for us. Let's take a look at the actual chart and see what it looks like. Yeah, so we gave up quite a bit at like 2,000 RPM, under 2,500 RPM. We gave up quite a bit. I would just run a stall at that point and not even think about it. But we picked up quite a bit from 5,000 to 6,000-ish. Probably shift that engine at like 5,800 RPM or so and keep it bouncing right in that peak, and dude, that thing is totally happy. So Crane has a pretty good winner here. The cam is not overly expensive. You know, it's a $230 cam, so it's not totally crazy, out of the realm of possibility. I mean, they're anywhere from $80 for the Summit, $150 for Melling, $230 for a Crane, or $450-ish for a Roller. That said, Roller is next, and it's another Crane. This next Roller, so this Roller is also a fairly big cam at 242, 252 duration, 114 degree lobe separation angle, and 0.558 single pattern. So that's exactly what it is on both of them. But let's take a look at what this actually looks like against that other Crane, since that is our current champion right now. I'm hoping for big gains out of this. I typically will see quite a bit of gain from a Roller versus a flat tappet in the same sizes of cam. So let's look and see what this actually does for us. Yeah, that's pretty crazy. When you're talking, I mean, going from 544 peak to 556 peak, 418 average to 426 average torque. Only 7 horsepower gain, mind you, but a 6 average torque gain. So this is a small gain. Really, it's a little bit everywhere. Would I pay the extra money to do this? Probably absolutely not. The big question that comes up is it worth it? Well, if you're running your engine super hard, if you're going to if I was going to put this cam into like a 350, for instance, it's a lot of cam for a 350. We're going to look at that in a second because I just want to show you guys. I would look at going a roller. If I'm going to stay under 6,500 RPM, I'm going to look at a flat Tappet. If I'm going to go over that, I'm going to look at a roller. Even at that, 6,000 RPM is a lot for a flat Tappet, but it's totally doable with the right rocker arms, push rods, and guide plates. And more importantly, the lifters themselves have to be good quality lifters. But for this engine, would I upgrade to... But for this engine, when I go roller, absolutely not. I'm not going to spend the $450 in the cam, plus the extra $300 to $500 for rollers, when I can get flat Tappets for cheaper. The cam is cheaper. The break-in is what you're paying for, essentially, just the ease of break-in with the roller. And if that's, your issue, cool, that's fine. I mean, do you, man. But let's take a look at that 350 with that same cam, just so you can have an idea what the difference is, and how I would set up one of my engines, because I do like less cubic inch than most guys. Now this Pontiac 350 with this cam is set up as an 8.3 ratio because of the flat tops in the engine. So just keep that in mind. I wouldn't run this cam in something like a 6X4 350 with super low compression. 8.3 is really low for my taste. I want to run like a 9.5 or so with this. And that's doable with going to 16 heads or something like that. But just for the sake of keeping things somewhat the same, let's run it that way. So looking here, we see massive drops in the peak torque going from 556 down to 413. And an average of 426 down to 323. Peak horsepower dove from 508 to 429. The average torque took a nosedive from 340 to 279. But you see the power carried considerably higher than the 455 did. Let's take a look at the chart comparing these two. So the thing here is really the 455 can move a lot more air. This engine is set up kind of wrong. The compression ratio is too low to be competitive in this type of environment. So I really only want to do one bonus test for this video, but I might as well do two. The 350 in this is obviously lackluster. It's because of the low compression ratio. If you're willing to push the envelope with E85 and jump to like a 10-to-1 compression ratio, you're really going to make some gains. Let's take a look at what this does if you're willing to run the risk. So at this point, our setup is basically flat tops and milled 6X4 heads. Personally, I would actually run something like 16 head, since they are a 72cc instead of the stock 90cc, 92cc the 6X4s are, but that's not what we're doing right now. But let's take a look at this. So the screen we're seeing here is the 350 just strictly compression difference. And we're going to go more deeper into this in another video, so go ahead and subscribe for that. So if you look, the peak torque jumped from 413 to 434, and the average jumped from 323 to 344. Pretty good average jump, going from 429 to 457 horsepower and 279 average horsepower to 296. That is a considerable jump to actually have. And we're actually still running 93 octane here, so keep that in mind. We haven't quite pushed it. We'll push it with 85 in the next video. So looking at here, you can obviously see the gains. No, we're not going to blow the 455 away, but we give ourselves a fighting chance at least with adding compression. What that's going to do for us is it's actually going to bring a more level playing field. The 455 already has more compression than the standard 350 does. So the 455 already has 9.2 to 1 compression ratio versus the 350's original 7.6. That's a massive difference. If you guys are interested in playing with these compression ratios a little bit, comment down below and let me know what you guys want to see. If you guys like what you're seeing, please subscribe to see more content like this. We're doing stuff like this all the time, maybe in a live stream or two. Have a good one, and I will see you on the road.